Okay, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock, and that means that we are going to start our WMUG Tuesdays webinar. This webinar is the fourth webinar that we are organizing due to the COVID-19 crisis. And one of the big advantages of that is that we are able to have national and international speakers who are going to present for us. Today we have Wim Matthyssen, all the way from Belgium, which is actually nearby. And Wim is going to talk about Azure Bastion. Well, we will go into more detail later on. But before we start the presentation, I have a few slides which I want to share with you. First of all, important is that we cannot have this kind of meeting without sponsors. So a big thanks to our sponsors. We really appreciate their help, and the sponsors allow us to organize these kinds of events. Then for next week, Tuesday, we have Alexander Benoit, and he's going to tell us something about cybersecurity in relation to the COVID-19 crisis. I think that will be a very interesting webinar as well, and you are all invited to join. You can join using the URL mentioned, but if you go to www.wmug.nl, you will be redirected to the meetup page as well, where you can RSVP to our meeting. Last but not least is that you can follow us on social media. If you are doing something on Twitter, please use the hashtag WMUG_NL, which is the hashtag we use for our user group. There are some other links there as well. And we now have a YouTube channel for which we want to request you to subscribe, because if we receive a lot of subscriptions, we can actually change the name of our channel. And as you can see now, the URL of the channel is not very user friendly, so we can really use your support, and so please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And what we will do is after this webinar is finished, we will upload the recording of Wim's session to the YouTube channel as well. Okay, that's it for me now. So I will give over the presentation to Wim. Wim, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kenneth, for the introduction. So I will first start with my slides. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this WMUG NL Tuesday webinar session about Azure Bastion, titled Azure Bastion One Does Not Simply Walk into My VNet. With the picture and the title, I think the theme and the topic of the session will be clear. So I really hope everyone is into Lord of the Rings. And for everyone who isn't, I hope I can change your mind by the end of the session. Before going through the agenda, I want to thank Peter, Kenneth, and Eric, and all other members from the WMUG NL user group for organizing these webinars. And yeah, first of all, also for inviting me to deliver a session. So on the agenda today, the things I'm talking about. First of all, I will add all the common VM administrative access methods. So the different ways, the good and the bad ones, on how you can connect to your Azure IaaS VMs before Bastion then, followed by a demo. Then I will talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little deeper in how to use it and how to deploy it, followed by a fully focused Bastion demo. After that demo, I will talk about the future roadmap. And before closing off, I'll go through some key takeaways, some things you really should remember about this session. And then I think we still have some time for a Q&A. So a short introduction. My name is Wim Matthyssen, and I work as a cloud architect at Synergix. In my job, I'm completely focused on Azure and the related Azure hybrid services. I'm also, since last year, a Microsoft certified trainer. So I deliver all kinds of Azure trainings and workshops. Since the beginning of this year, I'm also a founding board member of a new Belgium user group, MC2MC. Microsoft Cloud and Client Management community, and we're focusing on Azure and the complete Microsoft 365 stack. Since March of this year, I'm also recognized by Microsoft as an Azure Heroes community hero. And like most other IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, ask a question, or just want to say hi, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle. I also blog on my own blog, https://wimmatthyssen.com, where I write a lot of blogs about Azure and related services. So if you're interested, you can always visit them. So to start off, I'm going to look at all the common VM administrative access methods. And yeah, so the easiest way, but the least secure one, to connect to an Azure VM is by using its public IP address to connect to it with RDP or SSH. Depending if the VM is a Windows or a Linux VM. If you're using an NSG for that specific VM subnets where those VMs are in, you should allow TCP port 3389 for RDP or TCP port 22 for SSH to get it working. This kind of way of connecting to your Azure IaaS VMs is good for example, studying purposes, or you need to do a quick test, but you should never use this way in a production environment, because by using this way, both management ports, 3389 or 22, are widely opened on the internet, and your VM can easily be attacked, by example, by orcs or something. Another method to connect to your VMs is by placing them behind an Azure external load balancer. The load balancer then itself using the public IP address, and you connect to it with RDP or SSH over the public internet again to the load balancer, and then the load balancer redirects you to your VMs in the back. As I already saw this method used once or twice by a customer, but it's kind of way of, like they say, security through obscurity. People think they're safe because their VMs are backed in front of their VMs is a load balancer, and the load balancer will protect them. But that's not really the case, because both management ports are still opened on the internet. Only now there is the load balancer in front, the external one. But again, so not a good method to connect to your IaaS VMs in a production environment. So because both ways you can't prevent any breaches. This is because attackers commonly target those open management ports on the internet facing VMs, spanning them from port scanning to brute force attacks and DDoS attacks. And in the case of a successful brute force attack, an attacker can compromise your VM and establish a foothold into your environment and do all kind of unlikely stuff in your environment. So if you open those management ports in the NSG connected to the specific VMs, you will see that in the name field, the rule name is preceded by a hazard triangle with an exclamation mark, telling you there is a security risk by opening these ports to the internet. And also, if you open Azure Security Center, under your resource health hygiene, you will also see a security recommendation that management ports should be closed for those virtual machines. And as a quick fix, Azure Security Center will recommend you to enable just in time for those VMs. But that's the thing I will talk about a little bit later. So how do you connect them to your Azure VMs in a highly secure way with high security? First of all, by using a site-to-site VPN or an express route. In this way, you can connect from your on-premises network to the private IP address of the VM. So that specific VM doesn't need a public IP anymore. You just can access it by 10 point or 192.168 or whatever your range you use. But you can also use a point-to-site VPN to set up a secure connection. to any of the virtual networks from an individual computer. So we have a client PC, and from that client PC, you can connect to your Azure environment and work with your VMs. You can use a certificate-based authentication for this or Radius. But since last month, you also have the option to use the OpenVPN protocol and to use Azure Active Directory authentication. So it's really getting a lot safer and a lot better to implement and to use in a secure way. Then probably a lot of people use a jump box in the environment. That's also a thing we see a lot in other customers' production environments. The jump box or a jump host or a jump server, like some people like to name it. A jump box is a server on a network, in this case in Azure, which is used to access other devices in a separate security zone or in one of the spoke VNets if you're working with a hub spoke model. It's a control entry point into your Azure environment, set up in a separated VNet or subnet, like a management VNet or subnet, which improves the overall security and reduces the attack surface of your VMs. And from that VM, you kind of jump to your other VMs. So you first connect to that VM, and then you jump to the other VMs to manage them. To allow access from the internet, this VM also uses a PIP. And most of the time, it's deployed as a very small Linux VM. So you can tunnel your RDP connection through SSH. I also saw some customers using an RDS gateway as a small VM, and by this tunneling their RDP connections or SSH connections through SSL. A jump box is a really good alternative for a secure connection, but you should keep in mind it's yet another resource you need to keep updated. You need to back it up. You need to troubleshoot it when it fails. And if you want to foresee high availability, you should also implement two of them. So that if one of them is down, you can still use a second one to securely connect to your VMs. So as a last option to connect to your VMs, next to Bastion, of course, is just-in-time VM access, or JIT, like they say in short. JIT enables you to lock down your VMs at the network level by blocking inbound traffic to the specific management ports, like 32389 for RDP or 22 for SSH. And this for a limited amount of time of, I think, around 24 hours now. It enables you to control the access and reduce the attack surface to your VMs. And it's available if you're using the standard tier of Azure Security Center. Things you should keep in mind is only supports Azure Resource Manager VMs. So no classic ASM VM support if you're still using one of those. So how does it work? First of all, the user needs to request access to the VM. It's a thing he needs to click on. Then Security Center checks that the user has role-based access permissions for that VM. If so, that request is approved, and then Security Center automatically configures the NSG to allow the inbound traffic on this port for the requested amount of time. And after the time is passed, it restores the NSG back to its previous state. And all of these requests, an important thing to keep in mind is that those can be reviewed in the activity log. So if someone asks a request, you can follow it up, who has access to it, when he had access, how long did he have access, and so on and so on. So now it's time for the first demo. So let me open up the Azure portal. Okay, my screen. Okay, there it is. I hope the screen is big enough for everyone. So the first thing I want to show, we have a virtual machine, a Frodo one, to keep in the Lord of the Rings theme. You can see it has a public IP address over here. It's 500. So if you want to connect to that one, just click on connect. You choose RDP. Now you can download the RDP file. For purpose of the demo, I already downloaded that one. So I connect to it. You just can click connect. You fill in username and password. Let me see my super secret password. I will copy it so I don't need to type it and don't make any typos. And you can see I'm connected to that VM over its public IP, and I can do any management things I need to do. So you can hostname, IP config, whatever things you want to do. So I will close that one. If we look at the NSG, so we'll open the network security groups blade. We'll take the NSG specific for that VM. You can see 3389 and 22 are allowed, and you can see the exclamation mark saying that it's not secure to use it in this way. To do it a little bit more secure, you can go to Azure Security Center. Under the Advanced Cloud Defense, you can find just-in-time VM access. You can click on it. You can see I already configured 2 VMs to use just-in-time. If you click on the Not Configured tab, you will see all other VMs that you can enable for JIT. If you want to enable it, just mark it, enable JIT on one VM, configure it, select the hours. You can also select the specific IP range that's allowed to connect to it. Then you save it, and the VM is added to the configured list. So if we go to a virtual machine again, I have my ARED VM over here. This one is configured with JIT. So if I try to connect to RDP, you will see at the bottom over here, oh, that's not correct, wrong key. You can see the request access button. If you clicked on it, you can see it's requesting just-in-time access. It's going through all the rules. Okay, access approved on port 3389 for the selected IP. You can now download again the RDP file. I already did it for the demo. I already did it. So if I connect to it, you can see connect. You can take a time before the JIT rule is in action. So I hope it's already working. It could take around 1 to 2 minutes. I think it's not yet completely ready in the back. So I will give it another try. It's still taking some time. We already can go to, otherwise it will show the network security group. If you go to the ARED VM, you can see the JIT rule is added. So it's over here, and it allowed port 3389. And in the meantime, I can connect to the VM. So we'll type in the username and the password. 2, 1, 2. You can see I can connect to it now. Right, I will slide it over here. Type yes. And I'm connected through JIT to the public IP address of that specific VM. So that's a more secure way to connect to it and to do it in a good way. If you go to JIT, again, if you open the Azure Security Center, you go back to the JIT, you can see there's a third request now made by myself. Before there were 2, so there's now a new request and you can follow it. If you want to look at the activity log, you just open it, and then you can see all access initiated, created, or updated to JIT. You can follow it and check it all over here. So that's it for the first demo. I will go back to my slides. So what is Azure Bastion? The most important part of this session. If you look at the definition, Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside your virtual network, and it provides secure and seamless RDP and SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly in the Azure Portal over SSL. Sorry. Azure Bastion is a fully managed PaaS service. It's a kind of as a Jumpbox as a service, provisioned directly in your VNet. Just like I said before, to give you secure and seamless RDP and SSH access to all virtual machines through the Azure Portal, through SSL. When you use Bastion, your VM itself doesn't need a public IP to connect to it. And you also don't require any RDP client or SSH clients on your device from where you're connecting. So that's easy. You don't need to update an RDP client or whatever. So it's completely agent and clientless. It's a kind of a single hardened access point into your environment, which in the end, in Azure Backbone is built up by a VM scale set. And it will protect your VMs not only from port scanning and zero-day exploits, but also from malware targeting. So how does Azure Bastion works? Bastion itself lives in its own subnet, the Azure Bastion subnet, and only port 443 is opened, is exposed to the internet. Then you connect to your Bastion host, you connect over to port 3389 or 22 to your VMs in the back on the private IP address. So the VMs itself don't need any public IPs. So it's a fully protected and PaaS configured access station, like they say. A thing you should really keep in mind is that you need a Bastion. Currently, you still need a Bastion host in every VNet because it currently doesn't support VNet peering. So you can't combine VNets by peering and then deploy an Azure Bastion host in one VNet and then access VMs in the other VNet. That doesn't work. So if you have multiple VNets, like most customers have, you need to deploy a Bastion host in every one of them to be able to connect to the VMs in those specific VNets. So really keep that in mind. What are the use cases for Azure Bastion? So there are several ones. The first one is when there is no site-to-site VPN or a point-to-site VPN or ExpressWrite available at the customer. For example, in a cloud-only environment, and you still need to connect in a secure way to your VMs, then you can, for example, use Bastion. Another one is when a jump box does not really fit the requirements of the customer because, for example, port 3389 is not allowed, or it's a more expensive option to set a jump box because it's need to be set up in a high available setup and you need to deploy 2 of those VMs. And then Azure Bastion, in the eyes of the customer, is maybe cheaper to deploy. Also, it can be, there's a hardware requirement because of security reasons that you only may use HTTPS on port 443, or the customer really requires a PaaS solution because when he needs a PaaS solution and there is gateway and a jump box are completely out of the option. Also, if you need to have a solution that's easy, deployable, and removable, Azure Bastion is a good way to do it because with a PowerShell or CLI, you can deploy your Bastion host, configure, do the things you need to do on the servers, and then remove it again. So it's all. I think it's around 5 minutes to set it up. So yeah, it's a lot faster than when you need to deploy a complete jump box to do the same thing. And a last option and a final use case is when you need to foresee temporary access to a VM and nothing else in the resource groups or in the VNet. And for that, you can, for example, combine Azure Bastion with JIT. That's also a way you can use it. So if you look at the pricing, the Bastion host in the Western Europe costs around 116 euros, 0.97. But you should also keep in mind that you need to pay for this, for the Bastion host itself, but also for all outbound data transfers. Good thing to know is the first 5 gigs are completely free. And most medium and small customers, this will be more than enough. And then if you go up higher on the ladder and you go from different gigs to more terabytes, prices will lower per gigs per month. And for the really big customers, we use over 500 terabytes each month. They need to contact Azure Sales because they probably will get a special pricing for it. But yeah, I never met a customer who really uses 500 terabytes with Azure Bastion. So if there are, let me know. A thing you also should keep in mind is that the prices can differ between regions. So Azure Bastion is divided in 2 regions. You have a Zone 1 and a Zone 2. Zone 1 is in West Europe, East US, South Central US, and West US. And the Zone 2 is in Australia East and Japan East. So the prices can differ between those 2 zones. So also keep that one in mind. Yeah. Then an important thing to talk about is how do you deploy Bastion? So before you start with your deployment, first of all, you should check if Azure Bastion is available in your region. Last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, Bastion host was added to 20 new regions. So for the people in the Netherlands, let me say Bastion is available in the Western and North Europe regions. So for you guys, there will be no problem to deploy it. Then you need to look at if you have a governance strategy in place or if you have a specific Azure governance plan you need to follow. You should follow it explicitly for the naming of the Bastion host. Like, for example, you can name it WMUG NL-prod-BA, for example. And also use your predefined resource stacks. For people who don't know, you can add extra metadata to any Azure resource by using a tag. An tag always exists of a name and a value. A good tag you can use in combination with Azure Bastion is one that describes the VNet. So you can easily find in which VNet that Bastion host is available to use. There are some things you can do in advance before you deploy Bastion. One of those things is you can specify the subnets you need in a VNet. Keep in mind that this subnet needs to have the name Azure Bastion subnet and should be at least /27 or larger. You should also check if the necessary address space is available in your VNet, because the thing I see a lot at the customers is that the complete address space in the VNet is already used by other subnets, and then you can't deploy Bastion because you're not able to deploy the Azure Bastion subnet. And changing subnets or changing the range is not directly something you want to do. If you already protect the subnet with an NSG, you should also see that all inbound and outbound rules are in place to allow the necessary access on the needed ports. Otherwise, deployment will fail. So if the necessary outbound rules and inbound rules are not correct, you can't deploy the Azure Bastion because it's going to fail. Bastion itself also requires a static public IP. You can also create this in advance, and if you do so, you should use a standard public IP SKU. And then if all those things are in place, you can deploy Azure Bastion host using the Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, in the meantime also Azure CLI or by an ARM template, so you can do it whatever way you want to do it. So like said in the previous slides, if you want to harden the subnet used by Bastion, you can, like you used to in other security ways, you can use network security groups to only allow the necessary inbound and outbound traffic. So there are 3 rules you should keep in mind. First of all, on the Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic on port 443 from service stack internet, and also TCP traffic on port 443 and 4443 from the service stack gateway manager to allow all management traffic. As an outbound rule on the same Azure Bastion subnet NSG, you should allow TCP traffic on ports 3389 and 22 to the service stack virtual network, because this service stack allows the management on your VMs in different subnets in that VNet. So you cover all the subnets at once with that specific service stack. And then you should also allow traffic on port 443 for the service stack Azure Cloud. And the Azure Cloud service tag holds all the Azure Data Center public IPs, so it can do all the works that needs to be done in the Azure backbone. It can do it without any blocks. And finally, on your Azure VM subnets, you should allow, if you protect also those ones with NSG, what's the best practice? You should allow inbound TCP traffic on ports 3389 and 22 to the Azure Bastion subnet IP address range. So on the next slide, I have an example of when it was failed to put the NSG in place. So for example, when you try to add NSG to the Azure Bastion subnet, you can receive an error if not all the required in or outbound rules are included. So if you're missing one or the required rules, you will not be able to associate the NSG and you will not be able to deploy the Azure Bastion. And also when you try to change the associated NSG by removing or adding a specific inbound or outbound rule, you should keep in mind that if not all required rules are still in place, the delete or change will also fail. So that's a thing. The explicit in and outbound rule should be there, otherwise it doesn't work. So what about JIT VM access? So like I said before, you can combine JIT with Azure Bastion, but there's one thing you should be aware of. You still need to access the request access first under the RDP tab, and then go to the Bastion. And if you have requested access, you can go to the Bastion tab to connect, because it's still not, the request access button is still not yet integrated under the Azure Bastion tab. So you should do it and access it through a little workaround. So there are also some required roles to access the VMs. First of all, the reader role, you should have the reader role on the virtual machine. You should also have at least a reader role on the NIC with the private IP of the virtual machine. And last but not least, you should have the reader role on the Azure Bastion resource itself. You have different kind of possible connections. You can not only connect to Windows or your Linux VMs, but also to all virtual machines in a VM scale set, and even in VMs in the dev test labs. But if you want to access dev test labs VMs, you first need to enable a browser connection. So browser connect on their configuration and policies on those labs should be enabled, otherwise it doesn't work. I think for the moment you can have around 25 concurrent RDP connections and around 50 SSH connections, but the amount depends if there are already ongoing RDP or ongoing SSH sessions. So yeah, there are a lot of directly concurrent connections you can use. So when you have accessed VM through Azure Bastion and you have it in a tab view, there are a few things you can do. For the moment, you can only copy and paste text, so no file copy is supported, so you can't drag or drop any files into the VM. You can also set a specific tab to the full screen mode, so you have a bigger screen to access. And normally Azure Bastion and the tabbing is supported in all Chromium-based browsers like Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome. So, Kenneth, are there already some questions, for example, before I go to the demo?
No questions yet, so please continue.
Okay. So back at my screen. So I already have deployed an Azure Bastion host in one of them. If we click on it, you can see the Bastion host, has his own public IP and is connected to that specific VNet. Here you can see the specific tag for the VNet that I added. I also have some other tags added. You can also, for who's interested, add logging. So you can add diagnostic settings. So you can add it to your log analytics workspace, or you can add the logs on a storage account, whatever place you want to add it. And in this way, you can access those logs and see who has asked access, to which VM he had access, how long he had access, etc., and so on and so on. So if we go to a specific virtual machine in that specific VNet where the Azure Bastion lives, you can see that specific VM only has a local IP, no public IP connected. So if you want to connect through the Azure Bastion nodes, you once again click Connect. You click on the Bastion tab. So you fill in the username and the password. I will quickly speak to the password, then I don't type anything wrong. You click on Connect. You can see another tab is opening, and I'm in my VM in a tab place. From over here, I can do whatever I want to do. Can type in hostname. You can see the arrows at the side. So if you open it up, I have a specific text I want to copy. You can just copy and paste it, and it will be added over here. If you click copy, there it is. You can also click the full screen button, then the blade will open in a full screen. You can close it again through pressing escape. So this was an example for Windows VM. You can also do the same thing for an Linux VM. So you click on Bastion. Also protect this one, not with an SSH private key, but I will use username and password. So you type in username, you can type in the password again. I will copy it for sake of time. Click connect. You see I'm directly in my Linux VM, and from over here you can do whatever you want. Echo user, for example, sorry, it should be this one. Or Echo home, I think it is. I'm not that Linux specialist, so here you see it. The nice thing is, if you're the Azure admin, you want to check who has access to the Bastion, you can go to Bastion. You can do it from the sidebar. You can do it from the global search bars. You type on that specific Bastion, and you can see under settings there is the sessions. You click on it. It takes some time to load. You can see my 2 connections are listed over here. The nice thing you can do as an Azure admin, you can, for example, kill the session. So if you press delete, the session is gone, and it's completely away. So it needs to load again. So one of those sessions is killed, and you can also kill the other sessions. If you want to deploy Bastion, it's quite easy. You can go to the global search bar, just type in Bastion. If you use it in this way, the nice thing you have is that you can directly connect to the Azure docs. So if you want to deploy it and you're not completely sure how to do it, you can directly connect to the docs from over here also. So if you open up Bastion, you can just click on the add button. If you want to do it from the portal, I normally do it with PowerShell, but yeah, I want to let it see over here. You choose your specific resource group. You give it a specific name. I will give it WMUG NL Bastion, for example. You choose your region. The region should also be the same one as in your VNet. You choose a VNet. I choose my demo retriever. I already created a specific Azure Bastion subnet. It directly selects it. You can create a new public IP for your Bastion or use an existing one. I already created one, so I use the existing one. You can add a tag, for example, demo 3 or whatever. You can add a VNet. It's third one. You can click review and create. It's in progress. You just click create, and it will start with the deployment. This deployment, I think, takes around 5 minutes, and then it's all up and running. So it's quite easy to deploy. if you want to do it a lot faster, you can simply do it by PowerShell. You can open your Cloud Shell, run your PowerShell commands, use it, access your VMs, and yeah, remove it again. And then you only pay the price for the time you use it. So that's a way to keep the pricing a little bit lower, because yeah, the Azure Bastion host, like I said before, is already 116 euros a month. So a lot of people, especially smaller companies, will look at their money, 160 euros for every VNet. Yeah, that's an expensive price. So that's the demo. I will keep this one going. I will go further with my slides. So on the roadmap, the most important thing that's on the roadmap is the VNet support. So you can add one Azure Bastion, then apply peering between all your different subnet VNets, and you only need one Bastion host instead of a Bastion host for every VNet. They're also working on a native RDP and SSH client support. So you can open up your RDP client on your Windows 10 device and then access your VMs directly through Bastion from in that native client. And also a thing they're working on is Azure AD single sign-on with MFA to even more protect and better protect it. Also Azure AD PIM integration. So if you have some ideas or recommendations, you can always let Microsoft know through the Azure Bastion feedback page. So I hope you use it if you have something you want to add to the Azure Bastion resource. So to close off, some key takeaways. First of all, Azure Bastion is a PaaS service for RDP, SSH directly to VMs over SSL. So directly from the Azure Portal, you can RDP or SSH to your VMs. There is no need for any public IP address on your VMs anymore. For the time, you still need an Azure Bastion for every VNet where you want to access VMs in. So if you have multiple VNets, you need to deploy an Azure Bastion host in every VNet. You can harden your Azure Bastion environment with NSGs. So, but really keep in eye that all the in and outbound rows are in place. And you can even combine it with just-in-time access to limit the access that a person, for example, can RDP to a VM. And Azure Bastion costs around 116 euros. So if you deploy a lot of them, you should always keep an eye on your cloud spend, because maybe someone who needs to pay the bill at the end of the month is not going to be happy if you deployed 20 or 30 of them in every VNet. So really keep an eye on your cloud spend. I also added the references I used. Yeah, there's some of them, but these are the most important ones. So I think we still have some time for a Q&A. Maybe if there are any questions, Kenneth.
Hi, Wim. We didn't receive any questions yet. Okay. So I don't know if you have something to tell that we might wait for questions to pop up. In the meantime, if not, people can always reach out to us and we will make sure that questions actually end up in your mailbox somewhere.
So in production environments, the thing we see a lot is that, first of all, if it's a smaller environment, is mostly start with a point-to-site VPN from their local devices, mostly if it's developers to connect to their environment. But we now see a slight switch over to Azure Bastion, because it's easier to deploy and you don't need to set up client certificates or whatever, or you don't need to integrate Azure AD and the OpenVPN. So it really depends on how flexible and how fast you need to be able to access it. And I really find it a useful resource and a really nice PaaS service. The only thing, maybe if they lower the price a little bit, it's going to be implemented a lot more, I think, because 160 euros for every Bastion in every VNet, it's going to be quite expensive at the end of the month. So That's the only thing. Yeah.
Hey, and do you see a lot of customers who have to make modifications to their VNet configurations due to that requirement?
Yeah, especially the smaller customers, because they most of the time have a VNet. They don't. They have a short address range specified, for example. And the problem is because Azure Bastion needs a specific own subnet. The problem most of the times we see is that they're not able to deploy it because there's no place in the VNet anymore for that specific subnet. And the next thing is they're mostly using production and they can't stop anything or don't want to change it. And then as long as there is no VNet peering, it's quite impossible to put it in place somewhere in that specific VNet. So if that VNet support is there, it's quite easier. Then you can deploy an extra VNet, deploy your Azure Bastion in there with the specific Azure Bastion subnet, and then you just peer those two and you're off. But until that,
and I think that it's only a matter of time before these kind of functionalities will be integrated into the product.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If I specify address spaces for customers for new VNets, I mostly use specific ranges, and the first two ones, also for the gateway subnet, I also keep in mind that there is an Azure Bastion subnet, so I start counting from third octet or something, so that if needed, we can add some extra, because it's the same for Azure Firewall. If you need to set up a specific DMZ environment for it, it's at most customers, if the networking is in place, that's the first thing they deploy in Azure and the first thing they set up. But they most of the time don't really think future-proof, and then
Indeed, yeah.
And it's sometimes quite difficult to get those things in place if they need to be deployed later on.
Indeed, and who would have guessed a while ago that we had a gateway subnet requirement, but there would be another requirement for these kinds of hosts. So you never know up front, and that's just the way it is.
This because I'm working with it every day almost. I'm aware of it, and I already think about it. If I make a new high-level design or low-level design, I also keep it in place that those space is available. If it's needed, you can deploy it. If it's not needed, it doesn't waste any space because
Well, good tip for the people actually viewing this webinar. Hey, Wim, we didn't receive any follow-up questions. I do have one though.
Okay.
Can we make your slides available as well?
Yeah. I will send them through. No problem. Okay. No problem at all. So if they need to use the in and outbound rules, they should use explicit the ones I put on the slide, because those ones are really needed. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Okay. Also, don't change the service tags, because it's possible it doesn't work anymore. It only works with those specific ones.
Good.
So, and if you look at the Microsoft docs, it's not there yet. So they're not completely filled in for the moment.
Okay. Hey, what I will do is I will finish up this live meeting.
We'll stop sharing my screen maybe.
And I can share what I want to share with the audience. Okay. So if everything's fine, we should have visual somewhere again. Let's look at this. Okay, here we go. First of all, Wim, thanks for your time. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. We really appreciate it, you taking the time to present for us. As I already mentioned, we will make this recording available on our YouTube channel as well. To finish off, we will make the slides available again as well. If you signed up for the meeting, you will automatically get an email with all the details from us, hopefully this week. We want to thank our sponsors, so thank you for that. For next week, as mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we have Alexander Benoit, talking about all kinds of cybersecurity challenges due to the COVID-19 crisis. You can sign up on our Meetup page, and we will see each other next week at the same time. We do love feedback. I don't have a link yet, but what I will do is I will include a link in the follow-up email, and we kindly ask you to provide any feedback, allowing us to make our meeting even better. So to finish up, thanks again, Wim. Thanks for taking time to present for us. And we hope to meet you in one of our next WMUG webinars. Okay, bye-bye.